The sharp autumn wind slipped through every crevice of the trees, sweeping golden leaves in swirling patterns across the cracked pavement. Along the narrow path leading to the outskirts of town, the faded sign of Hope Haven Animal Rescue clung on, though its letters had peeled away with the years. Eric stood before the door. His shoulders were draped in a worn army jacket, his hands buried deep in his pockets. The rigid stance of a man long familiar with loneliness. He hadn't come looking for a friend. He had come only because of the gentle suggestion from a veteran counselor. Maybe just visit once. You might be surprised by what you find. Eric didn't smile. He hadn't smiled much in recent years. Inside, the shelter was warmer but heavy with the scent of bleach and wet fur. The echoes of barking dogs filled the narrow hallways, aching and hollow all at once. A young staff member approached, her voice polite. "Is there anything I can help you with, sir?" Eric gave a slight shake of his head. "Just taking a walk." The girl nodded, pointing toward the rows of kennels. "Feel free to look around." Eric moved slowly. Each step seemed to drag heavy memories along. The dogs inside leapt up, wagging their tails, barking, clinging to whatever scraps of hope they could muster. A beagle shrieked sharply. A retriever pawed desperately at the air. But Eric did not stop. His steely blue eyes drifted, unfocused, until he passed the last kennel. In the dim shadow of the corner, a large figure was curled up. Its coat was patchy, mangy, bare in places. One hind leg trembled, the relic of an old wound. That dog, Rex, did not bark, did not jump. He only lifted his head quietly as Eric drew near. In that instant, the rest of the world seemed to blur away. The clamor of barking faded into a distant hum. There was only one thing left, a look, deep, tired, and piercing, locking man and dog together. A silent nod shared between two battle-worn souls. "I know your pain, and I know yours." A few minutes later, as Eric still knelt outside the old kennel, the young staff member from afar noticed the strange, heavy silence. She approached, her sneakers tapping lightly against the tiled floor. "You're looking at Rex," she said softly, as if afraid to break the stillness. Eric didn't take his eyes off the dog. He simply gave a slight nod. "Rex used to be a canine," she continued, her voice tinged with sadness. "Search and rescue. On a mission once. He got injured, severed a tendon in his hind leg. Though he recovered somewhat, the wound never fully healed. When old age and injury came together, the unit had no choice but to retire Rex." She lowered her gaze, glancing at the small tag pinned next to the nameplate. "Not recommended for adoption, due to age and injury." Eric looked down at Rex's hind leg, where every step seemed heavy and trembling. He exhaled softly, a bitter, knowing smile flickering across his lips. "No one wants a broken-down dog," he murmured. The girl looked up at him, her eyes softening. "Unless they've been broken down themselves." That sentence pierced straight into the hidden corners Eric had tried to bury for years. A long silence stretched between them. Eric lifted his rough hand, lightly touching the iron gate that separated him from Rex. Rex neither backed away nor lunged forward like the others. He simply sat there, head lifted, his cloudy yet piercing eyes seeming to see right through to the depths of Eric's soul. "Let me take him for a walk," Eric said, his voice low, almost a command. The girl hesitated for a second, then offered a rare smile and nodded. "I'll get the leash right away." The young staff member quickly returned, carrying a worn-out leash in her hand. Eric crouched down, fastening the leash to Rex's collar. The old dog simply lowered his head, as if accepting, as if trusting without needing a single word of persuasion. They stepped out into the hallway, a short walk, yet carrying a different kind of silence. Eric didn't speak, only striding forward at a slow, steady pace. Rex didn't pull, didn't rush ahead, simply stayed close to Eric's left side, as if two strangers had found each other through an invisible language. From time to time, Eric lifted his hand in a small gesture, a brief, old military habit, and every time, Rex understood. Sit, stay, step back half a pace. No shouts, no tugs on the leash, just a silent signal, and Rex, worn and weary as he was, still remembered. Eric stopped, squatting down to Rex's level. Outside, the wind swept dry leaves across the damp, cold tiles. He reached out, gently stroking the scarred, rough edge of the old dog's ear. "Still remember it all, huh, buddy?" Eric whispered, his voice hoarse. Rex gave a faint wag of his tail. A light, almost involuntary thump against Eric's ankle. Eric laughed, a rough, broken, low sound, but real. The first in so many long years. In that fleeting moment, the walls he had built around himself began to crack. A veteran carrying scars no one could see. An old dog bearing wounds no one wanted to touch. And somehow, the two had found each other in this cold world. When they returned, the young woman was already waiting, a warm smile lighting her face. "I've never seen Rex walk that fast," she said, almost whispering. Eric didn't answer immediately. He looked at Rex, then at himself, the worn military jacket, the scuffed boots. Both had once been told to retire when they were no longer seen as useful. "This dog," Eric spoke, hesitating. Not everyone would recognize what's still left in him. The girl nodded. "I think he just found his person." Eric tightened his grip lightly on the leash. "I'm not adopting him," he said quietly, voice trembling but firm. "He chose me." And then, slowly, with certainty, he added, "I'm taking him home." Eric's old pickup truck rumbled steadily down the empty road, its tires crunching through thick layers of dry leaves piled along both sides. On the passenger seat, Rex lay curled up, his head resting lightly against the window, eyes half closed as if listening to the familiar hum of the engine. Drifting into sleep with quiet trust. Every so often, Eric glanced sideways. There was something strange, a feeling he thought he had long since lost. The presence of Rex, silent but not empty, seemed to ease the cold, hollow ache inside him just a little. By the time they reached the cabin, dusk had fallen. The small wooden house nestled against the edge of the woods, a thin thread of smoke curling from the old chimney. Outside, the grass had turned golden, a sure sign that winter was drawing near. Eric opened the door. Rex, still limping slightly, stepped down from the truck with a cautious grace. No call, no command, only the quiet understanding between two souls, a man and a dog, entering their new home together. Rex carefully explored the cabin. Each step was slow, deliberate, part discovery, part memory. Eric let him wander freely, inspecting every corner, the warm kitchen nook, the worn, faded armchair, the cold stone fireplace. After a while, Rex made his choice. A spot right beside the armchair where Eric often sat to read or simply stare into the distance. Without a sound, the old dog slowly lay down, resting his head against the leg of the chair, releasing a long breath as if finally finding a place he belonged. Eric sat down, tugged off his heavy boots, and let the silence settle around the cabin. He poured himself a mug of strong black coffee, his eyes never straying far from Rex. The way the old dog tucked himself in, wary yet steadfast, reminded Eric of himself, once cautious, once afraid to trust again. Night fell. The wind howled against the wooden window frames. Inside, the first fire in months crackled to life, filling the cabin with flickering warmth. Eric sat in the worn armchair, his calloused hands wrapped around the steaming mug, while Rex lay curled beside him, his battered fur catching the firelight. And in that moment, beneath the wavering glow of the flames, Eric whispered, not sure if it was to himself or to the dog who had chosen him, "We're still here, Rex." No bark, no wag of the tail. Only a quiet understanding, a companionship that needed no words. And for the first time in a long while, Eric allowed himself to close his eyes. To relax, not from exhaustion, but because he knew he was no longer alone. The next morning, the pale autumn sunlight filtered through the withered trees, laying a faint golden carpet across the cabin's porch. Sparse birdsong echoed in the crisp, cool breeze. Eric woke before 6 o'clock. He sat up, his broad shoulders still heavy with the weight of many years. But the familiar hollowness pressing against his chest was lighter now. On the floor, Rex remained curled beside the long-dead fireplace, sleeping soundly, his breathing slow and steady. His paws twitched slightly in his dreams, perhaps chasing old memories. Eric smiled faintly, a real smile, not forced. He stood, shrugging into a worn wool jacket, and stepped quietly outside. The soft creak of the cabin's hinges stirred Rex from sleep. The old dog's drooping ears perked up, slow but alert, when he saw Eric standing on the porch with the leash in hand. Rex struggled to his feet and limped over. Eric knelt down, gently fastening the leash to the old dog's collar. "Walk, Rex," he whispered. The answer came in the form of a slow but determined wag of the tail. They set off along the familiar trail leading into the woods. Morning mist still clung to the last leaves of the season like tiny crystal beads. Rex walked alongside Eric, step by careful step, slow but steady. There was no rush. Eric knew, just like himself, Rex was learning how to move through a new world, a world without gunfire, without commands, without endless loss. From time to time, Eric would stop, crouch down, and use old hand signals, relics from a life that now seemed like a different century. Each time, Rex responded, slow but precise, as if the two of them had never left each other's side through all those years of service. A simple signal, sit. Rex lowered himself, his eyes brightening slightly. A signal, down. Rex obeyed, his ears drooping a little but his gaze locked on Eric, waiting for the next move. Eric chuckled softly, the sound so faint he surprised even himself. Still remember everything, huh, buddy? He muttered. Rex wagged his tail gently, as if answering, always. They continued deeper into the woods, wordless, only the rustle of footsteps across dry leaves, and the soft whisper of wind slipping past barren trees. Neither needed more than that. And somewhere in that silence, something fragile, something small but resilient, had begun to grow. Trust. When they returned to the cabin, Eric brewed himself a thick, rich coffee while Rex sprawled out comfortably by the fireplace, his injured legs stretched long and easy. Watching the old dog, Eric realized healing doesn't always come with grand gestures or sweeping declarations. Sometimes it comes from the quiet moments, a wag of the tail, a steady step, a gaze full of trust given without demand. He was no longer just a man surviving day by day. Now, he was part of a team of only two, but stronger than any force he had ever known. And tomorrow, they would walk again. They would live, not quickly, not loudly, just in their own steady, quiet rhythm. The next morning, the sky hung heavy with a leaden gray, casting a somber pall over the tall, spindly pines. Eric zipped his coat up to his neck and stepped out onto the porch with Rex, the soft leash in hand. He bent down and asked quietly, "One round, partner?" Rex, though aged, wagged his tail slowly and lifted his paw, stepping toward the trail. They followed the narrow path that led deep into the forest, where ancient trees had stood longer than any stories Eric had heard as a boy. The wind whistled through the bare branches, creating a mournful sound like the earth itself whispering. Eric exhaled white clouds into the cold air, his sharp eyes scanning the surroundings, an old habit from his military days that had never quite faded. Rex stayed close, his ears twitching, each step steady across the damp, mossy ground. They had been walking for about half an hour when Eric decided to veer onto a narrower trail, a little-known path that led to a fog-shrouded slope. He moved cautiously, eyes lowered to the ground to avoid the slippery roots. But then, in a split second, everything collapsed. A faint rustling beneath his feet, a small tremor, and before Eric could react, the ground gave way, a natural sinkhole, hidden under layers of rotting leaves. "Damn it," he hissed as his body slammed down with a violent jolt. Rex barked sharply, a high-pitched cry tearing through the damp, heavy air. Eric struggled to lift his head, his vision blurring from the pain. His left leg was surely broken, he could see it twisted unnaturally beneath him. "Rex, stay calm," he called out, voice rasping with agony. The dog stood at the edge of the hole, ears erect, eyes wide with panic. Eric fumbled for the phone in his pocket, but just as he feared, no signal. He clenched his jaw, breathing hard. No one knew they were here. No one knew he had fallen. Only Rex. Eric looked up at his old companion, gritting out each word between gasps. "Rex, go get help. Go, soldier, go." The dog stood frozen, hesitating. His eyes flickered with inner turmoil, the primal instinct to protect his master clashing violently with the command given. "Go, go, Rex," Eric shouted, voice raw with desperation. In that fleeting moment, amid the whistling whines through the skeletal trees, amid the pounding of Eric's heart, Rex turned. He ran, limping but resolute. Eric closed his eyes, letting the pain engulf him. "Find someone, Rex," he whispered, as if sending a prayer out with the fading sound of his only remaining friend's footsteps. Rex shot into the forest like a silver arrow. Despite the dull ache pulsing through his once injured joints, every stride tore at his aging muscles. But Rex did not stop. Could not stop. In his mind, only one command echoed: find help. Save his master. Trees blurred past on either side. Mere smudges of darkness. A fine mist of rain began to fall, making the ground even more slippery. Rex stumbled once, his chest scraped raw by sharp branches. But he immediately scrambled back to his feet, his legs trembling yet his will unwavering. In the distance, through the thin veil of fog, a flicker of light. A rooftop. The Harris house, neighbors 2 plots down from Eric's cabin. Rex raced toward it, barking in a hoarse, frantic voice. Inside the small house, Mrs. Harris had just placed a kettle on the stove when she heard the sharp howling outside the door. She frowned, pulled on a coat, and stepped onto the porch. The porch light illuminated the sight, a soaked, filthy old dog crouching low, barking urgently toward the forest. "Rex," she murmured, recognizing the famous dog known throughout the neighborhood. Rex circled around her legs, then darted forward a few feet, turned back, and barked again, insistent, desperate. Mrs. Harris froze for a second. Then she understood. "Oh Lord, something's wrong," she exclaimed, calling into the house. Mr. Harris, hearing her alarm, hurried out. They quickly threw on coats and boots, grabbed a flashlight and phone, and followed Rex into the woods. Rex led the way, never once faltering. His silhouette leapt forward then disappeared into the dense mist. But his relentless barking echoed back, guiding them deeper into the silent forest. Finally, under the flickering beams of their flashlight, they saw it, a gaping hole, and heard a faint voice. "Over here, careful, deep hole." Mr. Harris crouched at the edge, shining the light downward. There lay Eric, face pale as death, sweat pouring off him despite the bone-chilling cold. "Hang in there, Jack," Mr. Harris called down, quickly dialing for emergency services. Rex stood right at the lip of the hole, his gaze never leaving his master, whimpering anxiously from time to time. And there, under the flickering light and with the distant sound of sirens growing louder from town, an unforgettable image was etched into the night. An old soldier fallen deep in the woods, and a loyal dog, standing guard, refusing to leave. In less than 30 minutes after the call, an ambulance barreled into the forest, its flashing red and blue lights cutting through the cold mist. Eric lay motionless at the bottom of the pit, his face twisted in pain. But his eyes lit up as he saw the medical uniforms and the rescue lights glimmering at the rim of the hole. "Stay still," a paramedic shouted before lowering a rope ladder. They quickly secured Eric's broken leg and carefully lifted him out of the pit. Throughout the entire process, Rex stood right beside them, his nose constantly sniffing the air, his eyes never leaving Eric for a single second. When Eric was placed onto the stretcher and loaded into the ambulance, Rex immediately jumped in after him. Despite his own exhausted, trembling body, no one stopped him. Everyone understood. This was no ordinary dog. This was a friend, a comrade, a hero. News of the miraculous rescue spread like wildfire through the small town. Local newspapers ran headlines: "Old Dog Rex, the lifesaver of a veteran." Touching posts flooded social media alongside a photo. Eric lying in a hospital bed, his frail hand resting gently on Rex's head as the dog dozed by his side. "Not just a rescue dog," one reporter wrote. "Rex is a symbol of loyalty, of a kind of unconditional love we have long forgotten." Town residents flocked to the hospital to visit Eric, bringing gifts for Rex, a new collar, premium dog food, even a jacket embroidered with the word "Guardian." When asked how Rex could do something so extraordinary, Eric simply smiled, his gaze warm. "Because we were both soldiers. Once your comrades for life." That night, as the hospital lights dimmed and the hallway noises faded, Eric lay still on his bed, watching Rex sleeping peacefully at his feet. He reached out, gently stroking the scruffy, graying fur. "We're still here, aren't we, Rex?" he whispered. Rex lifted his head, licked Eric's fingers softly, and his thin tail wagged faintly in the darkness. No more words were needed. This friendship, this loyalty, it said everything that needed to be said. In the months following the accident, the rhythm of life between Eric and Rex slowly settled back into place. The entire town had grown familiar with the sight of the two old friends quietly walking side by side, a veteran with slow, steady steps and an aging dog with a limping gait. Yet within that silence was a bond so strong, so palpable, that anyone passing by could feel it without a word being spoken. Rex, though old and frail, always maintained a silent vigilance. One winter night, while the wind howled outside and the town slept deeply, a sharp noise shattered the night, the sound of breaking glass. Rex leapt up, the instincts of his former days reawakened. He stood guard in front of the door, his fur bristling, his eyes glowing bright in the darkness. Eric jolted awake, throwing on a sweater and rushing out onto the porch. Across the street, he spotted a dark figure slipping away from a neighbor's house, disappearing into the shadows. Rex let out low, thunderous barks that broke through the sleeping town. Lights flickered on in every house. Windows flew open. A few neighbors ran outside. The burglar, panicked, stumbled and tried to flee. But before he could escape the street, he was cornered. When the police arrived, everyone told the same story, about the old dog who was the first to sense the danger. A young officer knelt down to stroke Rex's head, his voice full of respect. He didn't just protect one person. He saved the entire neighborhood. The next morning, in front of Eric's house, the neighborhood children erected a small sign. This neighborhood is protected by Rex, the silent hero. They even drew pictures. An old dog wearing a red cape, standing guard under a starry sky. Eric stood silently on the porch, looking down at Rex lying peacefully at his feet, and gently stroked his head. "We don't need any titles, do we, old friend?" he whispered. "Just being here together like this is enough." Rex nudged Eric's hand softly with his nose, a small gesture. Yet it carried all the love and loyalty he had carried for a lifetime. The evening shadows stretched long across the porch. Eric and Rex, two warriors without medals, without fanfare, sat there still, silent and steadfast, like ancient trees enduring the heart of winter. That winter, the snow fell heavier than in any year before. Eric and Rex kept their daily routine, the old coat, the worn leash, and their slow steps wandering around the edge of the forest. On the rare sunny days, they would sit together on the old wooden bench by the porch, watching the sun rise over the rows of barren pines. Rex, now aged just like his companion, still struggled to rise every time Eric called. His eyes remained bright, but his steps had grown heavier. Eric never rushed him. He understood. Every day with Rex by his side was a precious day. One early spring morning, when the last patches of snow had melted into small puddles, Eric woke up as usual, brewed himself a cup of coffee, and turned to look at the small bed by the fireplace. Rex still lay there, peaceful, silent. Eric called softly, "Rex, time to get up, old friend." There was no response. He walked over, knelt down, and gently touched the fur now frosted with white. Rex's body still held a trace of warmth, but his soul had already departed, like a silent warrior slipping away at dawn. After his final mission was complete, Eric bowed his head. He didn't cry, not because the pain was small, but because it was too sacred to be expressed merely with tears. That afternoon, beneath the great oak tree where the two of them had spent countless hours, Eric dug a small grave. He wrapped Rex in the familiar blanket and buried him along with the old collar that had followed him throughout their journey. On a simple wooden marker, with trembling hands, he carved, "Rex, friend, hero, brother." The spring wind stirred through the trees, carrying the scent of damp earth and the whispering of leaves. Eric stood there for a long time, holding his old cap against his chest, as if saluting a soldier returning home one last time. He whispered, "You didn't just save me, Rex. You taught me that even broken hearts can find family, once again." Life moved on, slowly. Every morning, Eric would still brew an extra cup of coffee, placing it on a small saucer by the fireplace, as if Rex were still there. He still walked around town, sometimes pausing by the oak tree, smiling at the tender young leaves sprouting anew. Rex was no longer present in body, but his footprints, in Eric's heart. in every corner of Hope Haven, would never fade. Because loyal souls never truly leave. They simply change the way they stay. In memories, in glances, in every breath of those they once saved. And Eric, whenever he lifted his gaze to the brilliant morning sky, would softly whisper, "Thank you, brother. I am no longer alone." There are encounters that seem small but end up changing an entire life. Eric and Rex found each other when both believed they had lost their way, only to walk forward together. Healing wounds that even time itself had once been powerless against. Because love, loyalty, and sacrifice sometimes come from the silent companions, with hearts larger than anything we could imagine. And no matter how many winters return, deep within every step they once shared, that friendship will continue to smolder, like a flame that never dies. Thank you, Rex. Thank you to all the four-legged friends, the silent heroes of our lives.